started then, and we'll just keep that in mind that we can only take this so far. Do we need to do a roll call introductions, or we can all see each other? Is that good enough, or should we do a roll call?
Yeah, for the record purpose, right?
Okay.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and start out as we would normally do.
Okay, so I'll start. Clancy Black, Chair of TMAC.
So I'm Mitsu Saito, TMAC.
Joy McMurray, TMAC.
Gary McGinn, Provo City.
Robert Mills, Provo City.
Gavin Weaver, Provo City.
David Day, Provo City.
Shane Winters, Provo City.
All right.
Hey, Austin Taylor, Provo City.
There you go.
Okay, I think that's everybody. Thanks for being here today. We'll go ahead and jump to item 1 of the agenda then, which I believe is an update on the final transportation master plan. A few quick comments for me. I asked for this on the agenda. It sounds like you guys had maybe thought of it already. I know the council made a few additions, or working with engineering made a few changes and additions, and I just wanted us as a TMAC to be aware of those and review those, just so we knew what happened and could be aware of those. So I'll turn it over to whoever's prepared to present that.
Shane, would you mind just kind of giving a brief update on that?
Yeah, I can do that. So as you're aware, I think what it came down to, kind of a couple sticking points that kind of developed that we worked through. The first being the 800 North corridor, from 500 West to Geneva Road. What we worked through with the council, and it has to do not only with 800 North, but I think similar to 2230 North, widening and some of their feelings on the need, maybe some of the timing. So what we did is we added an additional section to the transportation master plan, which included a table. Here, I'm trying to find it here on the actual plan. I think in chapter 4, let's see, where is it? That identified a few of kind of those sticking point areas, such as, again, 2200 North, the UDOT North Corridor Study, 800 North. It also, some other east-west mobility that had been mentioned from others in the council. Look at maybe other roadways, such as 6 South, such as 5th North, crossing those freeways. So what we ended up working through is we added that section and said what we'll do between now and maybe the next master transportation update, as UDOT does their major environmental study with the North Corridor study. We'll also look at these other, through a traffic demand model, start looking at other east-west mobility. We'll also start looking maybe at 8th North, depending on what happens with what UDOT does with with their interchange study. We'll kind of come back and look at what needs to happen, maybe a little more detail on 8th North. And then similar with 2230 North, which is a phase 1 project, we kind of made the commitment to the council before we really proceeded down with doing any major changes to that. we'll follow up with a complete corridor study and more of a better design, from alternative designs that we can present to them, to the community. So that's kind of the commitment and agreement we made with the council, and we're able to overcome that hurdle. I don't think there was any really other major changes from what TMAC had kind of made the recommendation, your positive recommendation from the prior, what you guys had looked at and approved and gave recommendation. There wasn't any really other major changes. So that's kind of where things stood.
So real quick, I'll mention Jim Hamla is with us now, so we do have a quorum. Welcome, Jim. So Shane, to make sure I understand, when I was listening to the council meetings, a lot of the concern was how do we make sure that there's additional checkpoints to make sure the right solution is built. And it sounds like what you're describing was basically what was done to make sure that there are those guarantees of future study, future checkpoints.
Yeah, and the process is already in place. I think,
right. Yeah.
And maybe it was kind of reiterated because it was with the new council, and maybe some of the TMAC. That process is already in place before we start really kicking off a major project. With the council, the funding's already somewhat identified. But the actual design process is already, we already present those things, through TMAC, through the Planning Commission. It goes through our development review process, and then ultimately gets to the city council through the budgeting process, saying, we approve that project, So the process is what was already in place to make sure that happens. I think it was just a recommitment to say, from a community's perspective, making sure that process is fully followed and fully, put out there to city council and to the public. So again, we just reiterated that commitment. We continue to follow that process.
So did any of the projects or scopes actually change, or were those kept the same and it was just the reinforcing of this process? So
initially on 820, the only one that really changed was 820 North. Initially we had a project that was in there from 5th West to Geneva that was just one project. One of the concerns was it was a $70 million. We showed as a phase 2, so somewhere in the time frame between 2024 and 2040. And it showed as a $70 million project, would include bridge reconstruction of the existing bridge at 9th West. It also included some bridge overpasses over the railroad and UTA. There was some hang up, some concerns from the public and also council looking at that cost. So what we did is we looked at, okay, we know it's phase 1, and they were good with phase 1 as far as from 5th West to University of widening that portion out to 5 lanes. That is still in the plan and is a phase 1 project. So that portion is still moving forward. But what we did is that goes back to the same, what we committed, we'll study this in more detail. We gave them kind of a plan of attack that we would look at doing that, is instead of just going from, the current facilities there, that we wouldn't just go from now to a 5-lane section, but we'll do it in a process phase. We'll go from, try to get the corridor into a continuous 3-lane section. But again, a lot of that's going to be driven by what happens with the corridor or the interchange, what UDOT's going to be doing with I-15. And like we said, depending on what happens, that will drive what happens with 800 North, but it may drive a lot of other different streets in Provo City. So we just said, we need to kind of get that information until we kind of get a better understanding of that. Then we can get a better plan. So.
Okay. Thanks for that. I appreciate that. Any other questions from any of the other TMAC members? Okay. Is the final plan published and online now?
Yes, it is. So you can Google Provo City Transportation Master Plan. The first link will pop that comes in there will be the current one. It's also in our on our city website too. that you can find through Public Works. If you go to departments, Public Works, in our engineering, city engineer section, there's a section for transportation, bicycle, and pedestrian. It's in there as well. So it is uploaded and available. We also currently left the old master plan on there. Sometime shortly we'll be taking that down, but we've left that up currently. But right now the new plan is on there as well.
Excellent.
And when does this process begin again to do the next redo of the master plan?
So it's typically every 5 years that we do that. One of the major drivers is that and we had that discussion with the council. Maybe Gary, you could speak to this in a little more depth. Is one of the things in discussing that is redoing the city's general plan. A lot of the initial, some of the discussion we had was, more of a high level of looking at things, maybe in reducing, vehicle travel miles, those things. And we kind of just let them council know. I think as part of that general plan update, land use plan, one of the things that they'll need to look at is that how land use integrates with that kind of concept. So I think the idea is to redo the general plan and the land use, and then once we have that, I think then we can start looking at how does that affect the master transportation plan. But typically, again, every 5 years.
Yeah, I think Shane really encapsulated what I heard the council talking about was trying to take a look at our transportation and the paradigm upon which we base our transportation decisions. And in this new general plan update, having those very high level principles put into place, then the next time that we can have a transportation master plan redone, that those principles will guide that master plan in the future. And I think the council's very interested in TMAC participating in that to help us fashion what those principles and what that paradigm should be. Because based upon how you approach or fundamentally want to look at transportation can affect the transportation plan and trickle down to individual projects. But to change some individual projects in the middle of the transportation master plan while it's based on kind of an unspoken premise is a little difficult to do. And so I think this is a good approach actually in the future for us.
Okay, thanks for that. I think that covers item 1. Robert, was there anything for item 1 we wanted to discuss?
I don't think so. I think that the only thing that I would add is just that we anticipate that the TMAC committee is going to be heavily involved in the evolution of the next general plan update and to make sure that the principles and the things that you guys identify as important and concerning for Provo get implemented into the general plan update, and so that those can then carry down to the next transportation master plan update. So we want you to be involved in this process, so settle in.
Yeah, we'll look forward to it.
Again, is there any sort of timeline on that we should be aware of, or it's just we'll start working on it, or the council does it first, or I'm just trying to anticipate when things will be coming to us or what we need to prepare?
Well, right now in the council's budget, and they're going through our budgeting process for our next fiscal year, which begins on July 1st. One of the proposed items in that budget is $150,000 for a consultant to help us with a general plan. And so we hopefully will be starting soon after July 1st, and that money's available.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, let's jump to item 2 on the agenda now then.
Okay, so for item 2, that I think the discussion that we just had leads well into item 2. I wanted to do kind of a visioning exercise with you guys, and these are the fun parts of planning, hopefully. This is the time that we get to just really think about what's important to us, what's important to our city, and maybe try and write those things down and help us get to a better point. But one thing that I want to do very first, and I think that this will help us, is help you all navigate a little bit. So if you all look on the bottom of your screens, when you kind of go down, there's where you can mute and stop your video. There's also a chat button. If you see that, then hopefully you guys can just see that I just sent you all a message. Did you see that?
Yep.
This will help with responses a little bit. Can you guys all reply back to me?
Oh, okay.
Is it supposed to go to all panelists or all panelists and attendees?
So we're all,
It's at the
So we are all
middle.
panelists,
Yeah.
but the attendees are the people that I haven't admitted into the meeting. So it may be members of the public that are listening by phone. However, we don't have any in the attendees. So I think you'd be safe to just do the panelists for now.
Okay.
so what I'd encourage you to do is just reply to all panelists. You don't have to reply just to me, but that might help this a little bit. So looks like we're all pretty good at this. And I'm gonna share my screen really quick and do this exercise. So I was wondering how to do this, and I went to my friend Google, and Google helped me out a lot because some people have already done this. So these are some slides that I found that I wanted to use some of these because I thought it was really good, and I wanted to make sure that they got the credit for doing these slides. So this is the Transportation Leadership Academy, involved with a few different people, and it looks like Lyle Ray came up with these slides. But I'm going to come down here a couple slides to get to the meat of what we want to do today. So this is a question that I wanted to ask all of you and hopefully get a response. And so you are welcome to write your response in the chat, and then we can talk about it, write it down, and I hope to have some good discussion today, being mindful of your time, but just hopefully this sparks a little bit of conversation. So question number 1, it's 2026 or 2030, whatever number you want to put in there, and you are reading the newspaper. Hopefully they're still around. You're probably reading it on your iPad. And you read a very positive headline about your community. So my question and what they're asking is, what is that headline? And I'd like you to think about this in the context of transportation, transportation planning in Provo. Hopefully Janelle Pugmire is still around, and she just wrote a great article, and you saw it in the Daily Herald or the Deseret News or whatever. What did you see? And let's just get some responses. Oh, okay.
Is this the kind?
So, yeah, this is a great one. So Dr. Saito replied to me, and his was the second UVX begins to run from Provo to Lehigh on State Street. That's a great headline. Anybody else? Gary's was expansions of destinations for commercial airlines.
From the Provo. Oh, that's nice.
Provo, the new model of suburban development, not suburban, suburban.
Mm.
Yeah, that's important, Robert. Suburban, not suburban.
Suburban. Yeah. Anybody else? And city staff, feel free to reply. We want to hear your answers too.
The mix, I like that.
The mix finally gets built. That's a good one.
Jim, did you mean to send yours to just me?
Oh, Dr. Saito put another one. Provo Center Street is now a 100% pedestrian-only street. What year is this, Dr. Saito?
Oh, maybe 10 years.
Okay.
The UVX one, maybe 5. Yeah, I don't know. Possible.
Here's one that I think would be a great headline to read.
That's
in Utah
nice.
County improves by put in whatever percentage.
Right.
I like that one.
So now, and maybe you don't have to necessarily reply in the chat to this, but tell me about your headline. How did that happen? So how were we able to experience that? Gary, I'm going to pick on you. How did we get to a point where the expansion of destinations for commercial airlines increased?
Oh, well, I think that if we have an expansion for commercial airlines, in my mind, that means we're doing quite a few things right. We have good economic growth, but along with that economic growth is that headline that you talked about, air quality. That's one of the big things that we're facing in trying to get good businesses and jobs here is the air quality, and businesses are hesitant to locate here. I think also it not just with the economy, but we have a good transportation network that gets people to the airport quickly so that they can fly out, not just for business, but for pleasure. Right.
I think that's great. I think that would do a lot to help Provo out. You know, that expansion of our airport, we're kind of seeing that happen right now. And I think that will be a really positive benefit for the city of Provo. Dr. Saito, how about yours? The second UVX line begins to run from Provo to Lehigh on State Street. How did we get there?
How do we get there? Number one, the success of the current system will sort of help people in the community to think about this new mode. And there are a lot of, I guess there'll be a lot of people who like work along the State Street. And if it's connected, for example, to the, what is that, you know, the big shopping area near American Folk Lehigh, near the DDI, I forgot the name of that. And if there is a line there, UVX line, some people might use that instead of using I-15 to get to the shopping area.
Yeah.
So people start thinking that, yeah, this kind of mode is the one I can use. Of course, always, last 1 mile or half mile thing is issue, but with the feeder buses or the providing like a bike rack, whatever in UVX, then the last mile can be taken care of, and then the system become very attractive.
Right. So that kind of becomes the spine
Right.
of that whole transportation system, and then there are other things that need to happen to support that spine and to really make sure it's successful.
Right.
And I loved how you pointed out that one of the major ways that we get there is the success of our existing system, right? To see that expand, to see that the ridership is, maintained the way it has been and hopefully increases over time, to kind of be an example of how that's a real help to our transportation system. Really
and
good.
also, it will be a kind of alternative to front runner also.
Right.
Some people wish to use front runner for long haul, but away from the front runner, especially people on the east side. So if there's a UVX, get on UVX to go to Lehigh, and get on front runner to go to the employment in Salt Lake County, for example.
Yeah.
So there will be choices to do that.
Yeah, definitely more choices and definitely more accessibility.
Right, that's the important point.
Yeah. Okay, great. Clancy, how about yours? What do you mean by the new model of suburban development?
Yeah, I made that term up, by the way, so don't Google it.
I was like, we better have a definition here.
No, I just I really feel like Provo is very unique in that we do have a very specific downtown area, and there are some neighborhoods that are very suburban. And I don't think we're going to ever become Salt Lake City with a skyscraper, 2 or 3 skyscrapers on every block. But I do think we already have and enjoy a lot of that urban character, while still having a good balance of, quote unquote suburban neighborhoods. So I feel like Provo is very unique in that way, and that's something we can embrace. That every housing type is available here and can be enjoyed economically here, and everyone, depending on what you prefer, is welcome and can fit. We don't all have to live in apartments. We don't all need a half-acre lot, but we don't have to go to a completely different city to get those things. We can get them all in one city. So there's my pie in the sky vision.
That's great. Any key things on what would need to happen in order to kind of create that?
I think we need to embrace diversity. I mean, too often when we are planning, we focus so much on categorizing everything as exactly this or exactly that. I think, and I think we're already pretty good at this. I don't want to say we're not, but I think we can get better at mixed use neighborhoods, and not necessarily mixed use in that there's commercial here and residential here and industrial there, but there's half-acre lots here and townhomes here and tiny homes here. Embracing that diversity and the right balance of housing types and uses throughout the city.
So, Clancy, I'm gonna take what I just heard and rephrase it just a little bit.
Yeah.
So what I heard from you is that to get to your headline, from a transportation point of view, we need to look at land use as well as the transportation system itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we have to keep in mind that the transportation is serving the land use, and we can't look at either in isolation. And so, yeah, I think in short, yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Austin, I'm skipping yours.
The mix. Is that the one in the Plum Tree?
So Plum Tree Plaza.
Okay.
We
Yeah, I'd
hope
love
that
to see.
develops. I hope that it develops sooner than 2026, but we'll see what happens. Joy, I want to go to yours. Provo transportation routes foster strong economic development. Why'd you pick that one, and how did that happen?
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I see things differently than some others, but one of the reasons I became interested in transportation in the first place is because I really care about Provo, and I've been concerned that as a city, we are perhaps less wealthy per capita than some neighboring cities, and I want us to be able to afford our schools and afford our first responders and firemen and our transportation routes that are expensive to build. I want us to be able to have all of those good things in our city. And a lot of that comes back to the economics of our city and our taxes and how our finances go. And I would like to see, while integrating many of the things that others have talked about, I would like to see transportation that works well with the city's goals to optimize our opportunities, our economic opportunities, so that we can have those nice things as a city. I feel like I've talked to Clancy about this before. This is my personal pet view. I don't know what others think about it, but I feel like two of our big economic draws are BYU and the hospital in terms of regional that bring outside people to Provo. And if they can't get to those places easily, and many other things like Center Street and other aspects of Provo that are being developed, if they can't get to those places, then they won't come to those places and we'll lose those opportunities. And I would like to see a really close relationship with transportation and optimizing the city's economic possibilities. As part of that is getting to that part. I'm learning a lot still. That's why I asked that we go through the best practices in city planning. I don't know all of it, but I would like to see an additional freeway interchange somewhere so that Provo can have a little more control over its own destiny. I don't like that one of the basically two major routes to get into Provo goes through Orem with University Parkway. I'd like to see us have a little more control over our own major streets, recognizing that we don't own those, that the state owns the biggest roads, but I would just like to see a closer working relationship there between transportation and economic development because of all of the advantages it brings to quality of life. Does that make sense?
I think that's really great. And I think that you bring out a really important point that I believe that transportation does have a significant impact on economic development, on economic viability. And that's very important for our city, like you said, to see sustained, growth and sustainable economic viability, having good transportation routes and transportation optimization is really, really important. I think that's really great. Thank you all for those answers. Jim, I didn't see yours. I'm sorry. I know that you answered that question, but.
Yes, I'm sorry. I had my settings on responding only to you and not to the entire group. I didn't mean to slight the entire group. My headline was Provo City adopts new city center or new center street transportation plan. And listening to all the other members of the committee speak, I think I probably want to change my headline. I think it was a bit too narrow, And I really like the broader scope of thinking that has been articulated here. But I like the idea of the airport. I like the idea of the model of Provo being a model suburban development place, and the economic development ideas that Joy has brought forward. But I'll speak briefly to why I chose the headline that I did. First of all, I thought it was a modest thing that could be achieved in 5 years. I would like to think that we could get airport expansion, and like to think that we could become a model of suburban development, and that we could really boost economic development in 5 years. But my observation over time is that those things are very hard to achieve in that amount of time. Maybe 10 years, maybe 15 years. But so my immediate response was, let's be modest and think about what really could possibly be achieved. And given changing city councils and the processes that are in place that we have to go through to make sure that the public is involved, that maybe we could get the kind of Center Street plan that we have been talking about in the committee in place and adopted and implemented within 5 years. And so to answer the question, well, how did that happen? I guess I've suggested that the way it would happen is that we as a committee would need to pursue that issue, ensure that the city council was aware of the issue and pursuing it themselves and not letting it get lost. And why I think it's important is that the city center is a hub, in addition to, as Joy said, BYU, and but I do think it's a vital hub for the entire city, not just one part of the city, which I think BYU tends to be somewhat at times separate from the rest of the city. But everyone in the city, I think, tends to congregate to be affected by the city center. And thus, if it's made to be what we have been talking about, I think it can revitalize the entire city and move us forward towards becoming the ideal suburban place that that Clancy has envisioned, and I think properly so.
I think that's great, and I appreciate that you picked something that maybe we have a little bit more control over as far as a group and a city, and that we could really see some substantial progress towards, and but again, something that we have maybe a little bit more control, and that speaking from a transportation point of view, I think that would really benefit the city if we worked on those types of things. Thank you all. I'm going to go to the next slide, and I want you to think about the answers that you put as we continue in this exercise. Okay. So this one we kind of talked about a little bit. How did you get to? Well, how did you get to your positive headline? And then how did transportation in a broad concept contribute to that achievement? And we talked about this a little bit, but
I'll add a little for mine, Robert, if that's sorry. I interrupted you there. Sorry.
Go for it, Clancy.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I was thinking about that. How did transportation in a broad concept contribute to that achievement? Me talking about sort of this category that's a little less than urban, but more dense and mixed than suburban. I think transportation contributed or would contribute to that, because with a variety of transportation options, everybody doesn't need a 3-car garage and half an acre to fit all the things they want to do. You know, they can live in an apartment and have access to other transportation alternatives in order to enjoy regional amenities and attractions. They can use bike or walk. They can not have any cars at all. And so I think having a robust and diverse transportation system is critical to that, so that people have those options. They don't have to choose from just one housing type. They can pick from many options.
I think that's right on. I'm going to answer my headline question with this one. How did transportation in a broad sense help achieve what I hope to see in a headline, and that's, you know, some sort of reduction in the amount of particulates in the air and improvement in our air quality. Shortly after I came to the city of Provo, it was like a month and a half or something like that. The community development department, what we were formerly known as, and then the city council, in conjunction with the mayor's office as well, we kind of put together this, it was kind of a conference on land use, zoning issues, and brought in, you know, some really great experts, one of whom had been a professor at the University of Utah. I didn't go to the University of Utah, so he wasn't near and dear to me, but what he said was really great. He had taught there for many years, and then eventually had made the decision to move his family to Arizona to teach in, I think, at ASU or something like that. And he cited specifically that air quality was kind of the driving force of that decision, because that the air quality of Utah had become so disruptive to his lifestyle that they needed to make an actual location change. And I thought about that, and I've seen that happen over the years, that we've been back here in Utah, and to me, transportation is a major impact in what our air quality is going to be like. And the reason I think it's possible is, in these couple short months, while we've been going through this pandemic thing, there have been some significant positive changes that have happened in our air quality. And I think that the introduction of, you know, the idea that maybe we don't all need to drive to a location has benefited our air quality significantly. And so transportation seems to me to be a key component in that air quality part. And I would hope that, like Clancy said, developing a robust transportation system would also help us get to that air quality improvement, not just focusing on a reduction in cars because of a pandemic, but a broader range of transportation availability and uses and capacity, because it's improving the quality of life that we have. Any other ideas on how transportation is going to, in a broad sense, help your headline come to pass? Joy, what do you think?
I talked about this a little bit, but I love some of Clancy's ideas about the robust transportation system, and I think that contributes a lot to our economic development, because you have different people with different transportation needs. And I love that UBX has made it really easy for students to get downtown and have a bigger presence on Center Street, for example, and help those businesses. And I love that we have the scooters and Better, our lovely bike advocacy group who helps those things happen. So biking is feasible for someone like Clancy who wants to bike with his kids, or my family when we want to go biking with our family. to make it safe and possible to do those things. So absolutely, transportation has the potential to bring in different demographics who use different kinds of transportation and help them all get to where they need to go. That helps that economic development happen.
Great. Let's, in the interest of time, there are a couple more questions that I wanted to just go over as part of our visioning. So this one was important. What kinds of changes in transportation policy and spending would you need to make to bring about your positive headline? Dr. Saito, how about yours? Oh, maybe he's...
That's actually better. Turn down. Yeah, that'll be good. When? Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, so I didn't realize that.
You want to give him a minute and then you come back to him?
I didn't see that he was on the phone. I'm sorry. Clancy, how about you?
There we go. Sorry, I wasn't thinking. Trying to figure out what's going on. What kind of change in policy and spending? Okay, so I
Sorry,
think. Welcome back, Dr. Saito. I think I actually really like our master plan, because a lot of what's in our master plan right now is new connections or improved connections, and I think connectivity is important. I think the major change in policy and spending is figuring out a way to fund and prioritize the non-roadway projects, the active transportation projects. There's a lot of projects on there that don't have any funding and are critical to the city, and I think we have to find a way to prioritize and fund those. I know that's on our to-do list. I want to talk about it more later, but to me, that's the biggest change in terms of spending. There's so much federal requirements behind the money for our roadway projects, and that's why our plans are the way they are. But we've got to find a way to include all modes in funding and prioritizing projects, I think.
Great, thank you. Jim, any thoughts on this one? Or anybody?
Okay. Let's see. This one. Okay.
I actually wanted to ask some of our public works staff what they thought about this question. If there were changes that you might make based on this. And I always catch them when they're not. David Day, what do you think?
Mine are sometimes, I guess, facetious, but I like to explore, like, you know, the Jetsons. If you ever watched that, they had the little cars that would float above in the sky.
Yeah.
That would be nice. Or, you know, all electric, all drone delivery of employees to work, stuff like that. But I don't think we're too far away from that.
Excellent. Austin, you have some comments.
Yeah, for policy, a lot of our transportation policy subsidizes the use of cars. We provide free parking for people in 95% of cases, and driving on the freeway is free as well in Utah. So I'd like to see user fees, because right now it's almost free if you're driving your car around. You don't even think about the cost of it. Even though it's 50 cents per mile, most people just think it's the cost of paying gas. So if you were to charge for parking, if you were to put toll roads around, then it would put it on a more even playing field with the other modes of transportation.
Okay, good thoughts. Good thoughts. Anyone else? Anyone else see concerns or things that we could maybe change in the way that we have our policy and also the way that we spend our capital, which is a very limited resource, that might help with those plans that we have?
Robert.
Sure, Javin, go ahead.
I think part of it as well, in addition to the policy, is having a good relationship with your city council and having the direction on this is what they want as well. Because it's not just city staff, but it's working collaboratively with them.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that a lot of this comes from the idea of what Gary said kind of at the beginning, that we hope to create a really robust and a general plan that gives us good direction and that helps us create those good policies that they can trickle down, and then that kind of creates a priority of how we spend those limited resources and things like that. I think this is the last one. Yeah. So what performance measures would you want to be tracking and working on as you progress towards your positive headline? Things that you think would be important to help us understand if we're working towards your goal or going away from it, and who would need to be involved in that, in your idea? Dr. Saito, what do you think?
Related to my UVX?
Yeah.
Yeah. Performance measures, well, let's say, I bet UTA is collecting the statistics anyway, like travel time or the ridership and stuff. And also the kind of OD of the demand or in destination, and see how people are moving through the city using UVX. And also you check with, let's see, MAG, and find out how people are traveling along the State Street to and from their house and the residence and then the employment. And you look at the trend, and if you look at the State Street, there are a lot of apartments built along the State Street, and then see those new tenants working where, and find out those ODs, and then work with this like MAG and the Orem City, Provo City, and any other cities on the line along the State Street, and see if those cities feel the needs because of the let's say congestion. If you're on State Street, close to and getting closer to Lehigh, and it's kind of crowded there. So you look at all those statistics, and then see. Of course, you have to have money to build that. Say, I look at the availability of the funds, and if things are, work together to the realization of the UVX, then it'll be, this positive headline will become a reality. And so you need to find out how people are moving in the system, within the system, how many people are, for example, using State Street to get to their employment, for example. And from there, you can estimate the demand. Of course, if there's not enough demand, it's nonsense to invest in that kind of operation. So yeah, the performance measures, look at the, I would say travel time is one thing, and also see what kind of trip they're making, like a commuting trip or shopping trip or entertainment trip, whatnot. And as the city landscape changes, and even for, excuse me, Provo, downtown will have more high-rise buildings, like new county courthouse type things. And I think the Provo's downtown will have more high-density building and the residence. So once you see that kind of trend of the development and see, and then you'll be able to see if the new UVX will be successful. But you have to work with regional planning and then the city planning organization in the city. And so in a way, Mountain Land Association government is a really useful to do this kind of stuff.
That's really good. Thank you. And I think the people that you identified are really important. Joy, how about yours for economic development and transportation? What are some things that you would hope to see that would help you identify if we're moving towards your goal, if we're actually going to see that headline, or some things that we would definitely need to see along the way in order to get there? What do you think?
Yeah, I think there has to be a combination of some of those usage metrics that Dr. Saito was talking about, as well as the things that aren't there yet that we want. maybe those routes aren't being used because they don't exist yet, and you have to kind of have the visionary piece as well, and that priority piece, the plan. What do we want as a city, and how do we make that happen? And I would like to, from an economic perspective, I'd like to look at what are the economic centers in the city, and look specifically at how are the transportation routes of various modalities serving those. Can you get to them? Can you get to them within the city? Can you get to them from out of the city? Can you and kind of look at that. And we looked at that somewhat in the transportation master plan, when they said, here's our bike corridor and here are our destinations. But I'd like to look at it specifically from an economic lens and say, what data do we have and what vision do we have of what we'd like to exist to make sure that we're optimizing our economic potential.
That's great. Yeah, I think that to make sure that we're involving business community,
absolutely,
the city officials, county, everybody like that, to help us know that we're on that right track, like you said. I think that would be really important. Clancy, how about yours? Anything that you would hope to see that would give you some reinforcement that we're headed in the right direction?
Well, this is related to my policy change comment, but we're very good at measuring vehicle travel performance. We've got travel demand models and level of service and lots of other measures that are extremely effective and have served us well. And we've got to find the same type of performance measures for other modes, including transit and active transportation. If we can measure vehicles better, so that's where we tend to send most of the money, and we've got to find ways to measure all modes so that we can balance that money distribution the right way.
Excellent. David Day, you just messaged me, said that you need to go, but you have a comment. Go for it.
Yeah, kind of back to that funding. Most of our transportation funding comes through the sale of gas and other things like that. So and I've thought quite a bit about that, you know, as people are driving less during the pandemic, as we transition towards maybe electric or other forms of transportation, you know, and how do we maintain roads, and do the roads take as much traffic as they used to? We've been pretty flat for a number of years with trips, so it's a complicated thing. And so when you start talking, you know, funding, it gets really complicated, and to try to fund every transportation source out of that same funding area of gas tax is pretty much impossible. So I guess what I'm saying is we need to think of other ways to come up with more sustainable funding than what maybe the gas tax is going to ultimately do for us.
I think that's a really great point. That and it's interesting that you bring that up, because last year I got a notice, because we had a hybrid vehicle, and we got a notice saying that we would, you know, have this extra surcharge for that year, based on the type of vehicle that we had, and to kind of offset that gas tax situation. And I thought that was a good thing, that, you know, we need to find and identify other sources of income to support a more robust transportation system, so we don't have to necessarily rely specifically on one source of funding and things like that. I appreciate you bringing that point up. I think that this is a good place for us to kind of conclude, but I wanted to have this discussion today because I enjoy visioning. I love the idea of thinking about what do you want to see in the future, and the headline in the newspaper I thought was a good way to kind of encapsulate that. But I also wanted to go through this exercise to say that as we are thinking about transportation and policies and the different things that we want to see happen in Provo, that there's a larger process to it. And it's one thing to identify a headline, but like we did today in going through on how do we identify how transportation is important to that headline, how do we identify what is going to be important as to look for as we move forward to that headline. I think that's a really important part of the visioning process. And as we go through the general plan update and all of these future planning exercises, I hope that we have the opportunity to really do that and to really get down into some of the finer details to help us flush this stuff out. Anything else that you all would like to cover? Clancy, Joy, Austin, Shane, Dr. Saito, Gary, any thoughts?
I don't, Robert. I appreciate this exercise, though. I think it's very interesting to hear everyone's perspective. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I think that I really appreciated the things that all of you came up with. Joy, don't feel like you're an outsider on this group. You're here for a reason. Your perspective is really important. And if you find yourself saying, I'm not sure if I'm on the same page or whatever, that's a good thing, because that means that you're bringing a perspective that others haven't brought. So don't worry about that. Keep bringing that perspective.
Thank you. I do think I like cars maybe more than other people do, but I have a lot of little kids to transport with a lot of snacks, and not all of us are Stephanie Woods, who can bike everywhere amazing.
Right, and I think that's an important part, that we are working on a transportation system, and part of that system is cars, part of that system is a bus system, part of it is a train system, and part of it is our legs. And it all kind of needs to come together.
And I think that's my biggest take from it. I know everybody has a different, transportation is highly personal to individuals, you know, and what mode of transportation they prefer. You know, I can get wide ranging as I work on a daily, but there's a wide range of how people feel about it and what perspective they would like to see the direction of transportation would go. But I think your last comment, Robert, as I've been doing this, is one specific mode is not the answer or the solution to future transportation needs. It's absolutely going to take all modes of transportation and being able to accommodate all those modes to help address some of the discussion, some of the issues, some of the comments that were made today. And I always, you know, as we try to, it seems vehicles have become a negative, I don't know, feeling towards those, but those are going to continue to be part of that solution. But again, also with bicycles, with pedestrian, you know, transportation, with you know, trains, you know, airport, all those are part of that solution. And so I think as we do these things, I think we need to be made cognizant that we're not being detrimental as we try to really strategically try to focus in on one mode of transportation, because they impact the other substantially. And so just my perspective on that.
And I want to chime in a little on that. Maybe it wasn't clear in my comments. I hope it was. I think my whole vision and goal is that all those approaches of, you know, what people prefer are possible. You know, if someone wants to live near downtown, they don't have to sell all their cars and buy a bike and sell all their yard toys. You know, they can find a home that fits that need. They don't have to live in a condo if they don't want to. And if someone wants to live in a suburban neighborhood but still bike everywhere, they're close enough to bike facilities that they can do that. I think that's what I hope, that the options are available with the right. We don't have to have everything everywhere, but we should have the flexibility to adapt within the city. So
Yeah, I think you know, like Clancy says, given choice is important. If you invest in only highway, then there'll be an issue. And for example, for women makes more chained trips. It's hard to use public transit, but men probably, you know, to commute to work, public transit is one good option. I think that's what's happening with front runners. I see many men riding the front runner. So investing in multiple modes is an important part. Looking at what kind of people live and work in our region, and then that will give us a hint to where we need to invest in terms of providing transportation choices.
I completely agree, and I think that one thing that the last, you know, several weeks has taught us that virtual transportation probably needs to be an important part of that discussion in the future as well. Austin just brought up a really great point. Thinking about next month's TMAC meeting, possible items for discussion. Does anyone have anything? Austin suggested maybe a walking tour would be a good thing.
If I could
make sure that we observe health precautions, and if we're still able, if we can meet in person and things like that, maybe in small groups would be a good idea to maintain open meetings, you know, protocols and things like that.
Yeah, Robert, on that, and to all TMAC members, the Bike Walk Provo chair, Mary Wade, emailed me and asked about doing a walking tour, like it sounds like Austin mentioned. And I think she actually sent an email to all of us. I love the idea, but I also was thinking of our future TMAC list. And one of them, item 2, was to prioritize list of unfunded active transportation projects. Robert, is that something we could, I think that's something that'll take a few meetings or parts of a few meetings. Is that something we could start on next month, or did staff discuss that and have different ideas on when we would address that?
I think that's a great idea. Shane will need your help on that, obviously.
What I would propose then, I would like to begin that discussion of those unfunded, prioritizing those unfunded active transportation projects. That's important to me because I think a critical role we play is, well, that it's listed in our role, but we want to make sure the right things are prioritized. It's not just the loudest neighborhood that wins. So I think that's something we can do. And I think I'd like to propose that we potentially involve Bike Walk Provo in that, where we wouldn't do a walking tour next meeting, but maybe we invite them to spend 10 minutes sharing their perspective on priorities from that list. And maybe in a future meeting, after we've had some prioritization discussion, and when maybe social distancing isn't an issue anymore, we could then do a walking tour, but have a more targeted tour where we have specific questions. And so I think it could be a little more informative then. So to summarize, I'd propose that next meeting we include from our future TMAC topics, item 2, and we invite Bike Walk Provo to spend 10 minutes sharing their opinions or perspective on priority for those projects. And then maybe a month or 2 after that, we have a walking tour where we would have specific questions to and locations to look at during that walking tour.
I really like that, Clancy.
Mm-hmm.
Question for Austin. Do you think Mary would be, she sent out the virtual tour. I would really like to actually do a walking tour. And I think I would like to do it, but at least myself, before our next meeting, so that I know more of what we're talking about. Do you think Mary would be willing to do a small group tour in person?
Yeah, you could ask her, but I'm sure that they'd be willing to do something that's not on TMAC time, that's just with whoever wants to come.
Okay, I'll contact
They've
her.
done that before multiple times.
Okay, thanks.
Or if she couldn't give us a map, then we don't have to go as a group. Social distancing.
Yeah, she sent an, oh yeah.
But I would like her to take me on the tour and talk to me about those things as well.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, of course, that's one way.
Austin, is that the map that we had for strong towns that you prepared? Is that the similar map that Mary would probably do?
Yep, it's this one.
Oh, that one.
Yep.
Looks familiar.
You
with an email.
Find it. Yeah, you can find it on bikeprovo.org.
We'll have a link to that, or just have it as a PDF in the meeting notes that you receive from us.
Mm.
So you have that.
Yeah, I saw it somewhere.
And she emailed that to us. So I'll re-forward that to everyone so it's fresh. So Robert is asking Mary if they'd be willing to spend 10 minutes next month. Is that something I should do or that you would do?
I actually have a call with her tomorrow, so I'll bring that up.
Okay. Awesome. That sounds good.
I think that sounds like a great agenda for next time.
Okay.
And then Joy, I think it's great that you would meet with her beforehand. I would encourage anyone else to do that. And then if there are targeted questions or targeted things that we want to see afterwards, I think that's a great idea too. So, I really appreciate you all indulging me for a little bit today on this little visioning exercise. I hope it was helpful. I hope it, kind of maybe set the framework and hopefully what we can do in the future as a group, as a committee, as we talk about transportation, and it's not just roads and bike lanes and things like that. It has lasting impacts on so many different parts of our community. So thank you guys very much.
Robert, thank you. That was helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Robert.
Yeah.
Anything else you guys want to talk about before we end?
None for me.
Everyone.
Okay.
Okay, well, meeting adjourned then. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Hey, thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.